man, it is main card time. How you doing? How's your family?
I'm good, man. Titus right here next to me. Speaking of family, no, he's a dog, but dogs are family. Uh,
Dogs are family 100%. How you doing? But how you doing? Keep it moving. But yeah, we got episode 77 here of the Beefy Boys breakdown. We're talking the main card. We're talking Johnny Walker. We're talking Jamal Hill. We're talking light heavyweights. We're talking Jim Miller. We're talking Joaquin Buckley. How you doing?
well said. We'll
But
keep it pushing.
yeah,
Some history being made here.
yeah.
Essentially, every time Jim Miller fights, history is made. He is the guy with the most fights in the UFC all time, 39 with this appearance. Um, which, you know what I think I want to say about Jim Miller that's really impressive to me is that he has like grown with the sport, right? His striking and his grappling, he's been able to essentially grow with it in the sense of controlling on the cage, winning positions, getting to advantageous points that feed into his style, and he's winning the scoring, right? Like
Bro,
that's
and
kind of how I
sending
see him
guys
fight.
to fucking sleep. Don't forget
Well,
that.
we'll get there, but I'm saying like first round,
Even coming into this one, like his last fight was a fucking two, 14 seconds into the second round, overhand left knockout. Now, granted, the two fights before that were losses, but Jim Miller is one of these guys, one of the few guys in the UFC that, like, when I say legend, it's not like a weird backhanded compliment where I'm trying, where I'm fishing for something nice to say. Like, Jim Miller's like, I don't get bummed seeing him go out there. Like Jim Miller is just, I mean, he's killing it. I mean, great. I mean, he's 2-2 in his last four and 3-3 in his last six. So I mean, I think people are really quick to say nice things about Jim Miller, and that narrative is way more fun to talk
well,
about. But I
I think it's
mean,
important to note too, 2-2 in his last four, but the last two are wins in fantastic
yes,
fashion. So he's on a good note, but he
two
was
knockout win
0-2.
streaks.
He was 0-2 right before that.
Yes, yes. And both of those losses were decisions. Before that, he has his other win out of the last six was another finish round one armbar. So it's like when he wins, he fucking wins, and when he
That's
loses, it's decisions. So it's like that's still
that's
an easy
but
guy to get behind.
I think that but that's what I mean with his style, right? Is that like he fights just so smart. Like if you give him a weakness, he will take advantage and win in such fashion. However, if you're able to just outfight him as a point system, like the sport of MMA, then you're going to beat Jim Miller. But yeah, that's a great dude for the UFC to have at 155, right? Because that division needs that guy to find, like, if you're a flashy, like, dominant 155er, like a Makhachev, you'll dominate Miller, and it won't even be a problem. But if you're, like, middle of the road, it's important to see, like, are you better than Jim Miller? Because he's pretty middle.
Yeah, man. I feel you. It's there's a clear drop off in 2018 where Jim Miller goes from being like after the Charles Oliveira loss, he goes from like fighting kind of top guys to fighting guys like Nikolas Motta
Yeah,
who we fought last night.
and that's why I say he's like that middle of the road kind of a guy, which you have to have in a deep division, right? Like 35 obviously has
Yeah,
bunches
yeah.
of those guys. 45 has a good amount of those guys. 55 doesn't have as many as those two divisions, but does have a few, and he's one of those important
And
guys.
he's like the best version of that for sure. But yeah, man, Jim Miller coming in at plus 140. And when I say, bro, I'm not even exaggerating. I almost like drove to the sports book. I was going to the dispensary, but I didn't have time to hit the dispensary and the sports book. And I was still a little bit late to the first couple prelims. So like I love Jim Miller at plus 140 against the guy making his debut. Like I loved it so much. That's not hindsight 2020. I like almost convinced my wife to like make a stop off at Baldini's, and I but I didn't do it. I was in a rush to get back to the house. But I love Jim Miller at plus 140. I had a homie texting me that they love Jim Miller at plus 140 as well. Um, Nikolas Motta coming in making his debut, Brazilian guy, minus 160. I mean, I don't know if Vegas got this one wrong. Obviously,
Do you think it's messed up the commission sanctioned a bout between a guy that has the most UFC fights ever and a guy that's making his debut?
no, because they do it all the time, just with like worse versions of it, right? Like we always see
I don't
Mayweather
know,
versus like
man.
contender series guy. We see that all the time. It's just Jim Miller's a really good version of it. So it's like,
That's true, but it's like he literally has the most UFC fights of any fighter ever.
widest gap, set a record. So I mean, there's points there. I mean, history is literally made, never really been done before to this
Like
degree.
he's plus 39 in fights over Motta at this point in his career.
Yeah, but I mean, I get
UFC in the
it's
UFC.
a compliment, right? It's a compliment to Motta, and you could argue it's the UFC doing Motta a favor because if you come in and get a win over Jim Miller,
Okay, that I give you. That I give
then I
you.
mean it's hype train full blown.
They're giving him a dinner plate to serve himself up on, but
Card in your debut, right? I mean, you're getting card placement out of the deal. It's not like you didn't get anything out of it.
and he's the Vegas favorite, so they clearly
Vegas
thought he
favorite,
would
right?
win.
That's why it's hard for me to say.
I totally get all that. I totally get all
Yeah.
that.
But
It's,
I get what you're saying
I
as
mean,
well.
from
I
a
get what you're
sanctioning
saying.
perspective.
No, I get what you're saying. But I think it was a fair fight. And that's what it comes down to, right? When you're talking about
Yeah,
sanctioning,
for sure. Well,
like-
I would even say that. I mean, Motta, like, how'd you score round one? Because I think the judges scored two. One judge scored it 10-9 Motta, and the other two scored it 10-9 Miller.
Yeah, I honestly don't see how you give round one to Miller, and that's after just stroking.
Me
him off for
too. I
about
scored it
7.5
Motta. I
minutes.
just thought Motta's damage was way more in the first
Well,
round.
he rocked the goddamn shit out of Jim Miller. He had Jim Miller hurt, man. Like I was like, oh, maybe I'm not that smart after all because like, I was so confident. Loved the Jim Miller underdog, and then what was that like? I forget exactly how far into the round it started to go south for Jim Miller, but he got rocked pretty goddamn bad. About as bad as you can get rocked without getting dropped, right? I mean, he was rocked, hurt. I mean, whatever word you want to use to describe it, it was a big, big shot from Motta. And that was towards the start of the round. And it was a big left hook that did that damage for Motta. So I was sitting there like getting out my spoon, ready to eat shit on my hot take of liking the underdog bet. But then Jim Miller, I got to say, he recovered great. And I don't just say he recovered great. Usually a guy recovers at all, and people say he recovered great because he recovered. Like, no, Jim Miller recovered like 100%. Like, he was back in the fight. He knew where he was. He didn't look wobbly. I mean, it was almost like it never happened.
100%. Like, his recovery was crazy. But that's his veteranness.
Yeah, yes. And he's a tough guy. Everybody knows that. And then Jim Miller did start landed some super gnarly leg kicks, like very, very gnarly, and a lot of them, and often, and seemingly whenever he wanted to. And it was putting Motta on the back foot as a result. So it's like, that's where the judges that gave him the round, that's why. But it's like, at the end of the day, we're talking.
I see the argument,
versus
but
getting dropped. Or he
right.
got dropped because he didn't get dropped, but essentially, I score it the same as if he did get dropped. Now, maybe that's like wrong on my part because he didn't get dropped. Like,
I think the perception's the same, right? Like, I feel the same. Like, when a dude is that rocked on his feet and surviving, like, okay, he didn't fall down, but, like, he's barely on his legs.
Yes, and yeah, I think it's all said and done. It's relatively similar situation. But, I don't know. So, I guess, like I said, it's not the craziest thing in the world to give it to Jim Miller, but we both didn't, and I don't really like the argument for it. You know what I mean? Now, it doesn't end up mattering.
Right. That's what I was going to say is that he'll put all the critics to sleep and make the judges look good.
Put the critics to sleep, put Motta to sleep. Everybody's going to sleep.
In the second round, he almost landed. I mean, granted, Roy Jones Jr. did it with the left, but Roy Jones is famous for that leaping left hook. Well, Jim Miller landed like a leaping right hook. Mm-hmm. It was just so nasty, man.
And I didn't realize this until the post-fight interview, but according to Jim Miller himself, and I think it ended up being true, he hadn't really thrown the right hand. He was throwing hella lefts and hella leg kicks, but he hadn't really thrown the right hand maybe a couple times. But that was the first one that landed, and that's really all he needed.
I didn't realize that until he said it either.
Me neither.
I even have in my notes that that it was all lefts until a big right into the night.
And then Jim Miller.
That was a late stoppage too.
Exactly where I'm going. Jim Miller, all class. He talked about in the octagon, the ref was standing right there. He's like, I don't like how he made me keep hitting him. I thought the ref should have stopped it sooner. No, I'll be real. I didn't think that. I think the one earlier with Herb Dean was way worse. So maybe if it's like,
I thought they were both late.
Fair. I was going to say maybe that shouldn't be the threshold. Like if one's bad, maybe the line's further back here.
That's exactly what I was going to say, man. Yeah. Is that just because one's egregious doesn't mean that the other one can't still be bad.
Yeah, I think that's also fair, but that's just like where in real time where my like mindset was after just watching the other one. I was like, well, it wasn't as bad as that. But I believe Jim Miller knows more about MMA than Jim Miller's forgotten more about fighting than I'll ever know. So I'm not gonna argue at that point. I think it's a fair point, obviously. But Jim Miller, second round TKO, a minute and 58 seconds into the second round, cashes as the plus 140. And I gotta say, I was feeling like a genius up at that moment. But yeah, Jim Miller, I mean, looking great, and I know it's easy to say like, oh, when a fighter wins, he should keep fighting, and when he loses, he should retire. But I don't think it's necessarily that black and white. Like, but Jim Miller's looking right. Like you said, we 2 finishes in a row,
But I think he
two
looks
second
good
round
too.
finishes in a
I
row.
think he's
Looks
evolving
great.
his fight style.
Yeah, right. Like he doesn't look like a relic. Like he doesn't look like a guy that we're like fishing to like say nice things about or having to bring up the Gloria days or like he's a guy that like actively looks good in there as at the moment, both physically, both mentally. He doesn't look. That's another thing they say. The first thing that goes to speed, not the power. Like he doesn't look. He's fighting young guys, young lions, youngsters. He doesn't look slow in there, right? I mean, yeah. I mean, big Jim Miller guy here. He's a hoot to follow on social media as well. But I don't know. Jim Miller gets the win.